people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. You may have heard earlier today that undisputed super middleweight champion Savannah Marshall, newly crowned, is to make her MMA debut as she inks a multi-year agreement with the PFL, the third prominent woman boxer to ink a deal with the MMA outfit. The Professional Fighters League announced the signing of the undisputed super middleweight world champion.
I did not see this coming.
I am thrilled to begin my journey in mixed martial arts with the Professional Fighters League, said Savannah Marshall. I'm proud to join the most talented female combat sports athletes in the world and continue to raise the profile of women in sports through PFL. Marshall now joins the same MMA organization as her career rival, Clarissa Shields, who decisioned the British boxer back in October of last year.
I did not see this coming.
I didn't know Savannah had any interest in MMA and mixed martial arts. I had no idea she aspired to compete as a mixed martial artist beyond her boxing career, and it does take me by surprise because she just won the undisputed crown at super middleweight. So I figured she'd stick around the sport a bit, defend those titles. Her mandatory challenger, Tszyu Green, is waiting in the queue. Where does this recent announcement leave that fight?
Savannah, like Clarissa Shields and Amanda Serrano before her, is going to try her hand at MMA.
Marshall is set to begin her MMA career inside the PFL Smart Cage and joins a roster which includes Shields, two-time Olympic gold medalist Kayla Harrison, PFL world champion Larissa Pacheco, and Amanda Serrano. I want to welcome two-time boxing world champion Savannah Marshall to the Professional Fighters League, said Peter Murray, PFL CFO.
CEO.
Whatever. It's an exciting time for PFL as we officially launch PFLW, and the addition of Savannah Marshall strengthens the best global roster of women in combat sports. PFLW is committed to the empowerment and equality of all female athletes and provides a dedicated platform for women to become PFL MMA champions.
When Amanda Serrano announced that she was going to be going back to MMA, I more or less understood because Amanda's very accomplished. She's been in the sport of boxing for years, and there's not that much left for her to do. A champion at 7 weights, a current reigning undisputed champion.
I understood. I even understood when Clarissa announced that she would be going back to mixed martial arts because she's already fought most of the somebodies anywhere in between 154, 160, and 168, short of a Marshall rematch. There are no other money fights out there for her, so I understood.
But Savannah?
Well, that one threw me for a loop because there are other fights out there for Savannah. There's a fight with Tszyu Green, her mandatory challenger, perhaps a fight with Germany's own Christina Hammer, former unified middleweight champion.
Hannah Gabriels, if she can clear her name from that doping scandal.
Listen, I'm not crazy about this news. I'm not crazy about this assignment. I love Savannah Marshall. I've loved her for many years now, and I'm not going to apologize for that.
I love her still.
I love her boxing. I love what she does inside of the squared circle, but I'm not an MMA fan. I don't actually watch very much of mixed martial arts, whether it's PFL's brand or the UFC.
Or Beatrix.
Bellator.
Whatever.
Seems to me like for Savannah, this is a move that's more motivated by money than anything else. There are not that many big money fights left for Savannah Marshall. I mean, there are opponents. There is Tszyu Green and fighters like Raquel Miller, former champion Christina Hammer,
Hannah Gabriels.
Lindsay Ruiz. There are 1 or 2, 3 or 4 fights I can think of that are still out there for Savannah Marshall that make for interesting fights, but not big money fights, big cash fights. Whereas in the cage, in the octagon, because it's a novel route for Savannah Marshall, it's almost like hitting the reset button on her combat sports career, even if it is in a different combat sport.
They're making it worth her while in terms of money. That's what I think it is. Maybe they stage a rematch between her and Clarissa in the octagon instead of the boxing ring on their dime.
And I'm might tune into that because I'm familiar with the both of those fighters as pugilists, as boxers. Maybe I take in that fight, though ultimately I'm not going to be reporting on MMA matches. This is a boxing channel.
Boxing.
That's the reality of it. I look at this and I think to myself, if Savannah's going into mixed martial arts, it's probably because they're making it worth her while financially. I don't know that it comes from a genuine desire and a passion for that particular discipline, that particular combat sport. Maybe she feels she'll make more money in MMA at this point than she would in boxing.
Maybe.
What is that? The right motivation at this stage and at this age. Savannah Marshall is not the oldest, but she's certainly not the youngest. She's in her early 30s, and now you want to start experimenting with mixed martial arts?
I don't like it.
These are very jealous sports, boxing and mixed martial arts, that require supreme focus and undivided attention. And her attention very much would be divided if she were toggling between the two, between boxing and MMA.
I don't like this move. I don't like it. I'm being honest.
But that's the latest when it comes to Savannah. Men's Cruiserweight news. Opataya begins talks for Thompson defense. Talks have begun between Jai Opataya and Jordan Thompson for a September 30th clash in the UK for Opataya's IBF and Ring Magazine World Cruiserweight titles. It appears that Maris Breedis is injured and he's dropping out. Whatever the case, I'm not surprised. That fight that they had over a year ago was a physically taxing fight, perhaps more physically taxing for Maris Breedis, the former champion, than it was for Jai Opataya. In spite of Jai having his jaw broken in two places, he's a much younger man than Maris Breedis, and that Maris hasn't fought since then, it's indicative of just how physically taxing that fight was for him.
For a second there, it looked like the rematch was going to happen after Richard Riakporhe decided to withdraw from the purse bid.
Likely was instructed to withdraw from the purse bid by his promoter, Ben Shalom, who claimed he doesn't even know if Matchroom really has Jai Opataya under contract. He doesn't know if they're just saying that to mess him about. Well, there you have it. He's set to fight on a Matchroom show.
It's a stupid fucking comment, to say the least, because Jai Opataya himself confirmed he's now being co-promoted by Matchroom. Ben was just scrambling for something to say.
So what he elected to do was say something stupid instead of just saying nothing at all. Jai Opataya very much is a Matchroom fighter, and it's not a secret that the last couple of months, the last year or so, Matchroom has expressed an interest in expanding their area of operations to the land down under, to Australia. They have since done a show there and signed a good number of Australian fighters, Jai Opataya among them, more famously Ebony Bridges and Dempsey McKean, Sky Nicholson,
Liam Pardo,
unbeaten up-and-coming heavyweight Justice Hooney. I mean, it's not a secret that they've signed a good number of Australian fighters, so why would they be lying about signing Jai Opataya?
Ben's a moron.
Jai's supposed to be fighting unbeaten up-and-comer Jordan Thompson, a guy who you might have seen once or twice on the undercard of several Matchroom shows. What's working for Jordan more than anything is that in spite of Jai being a seasoned fighter, a crafty southpaw, a mobile one, he hasn't fought in over a year's time.
This is going to be Jai's first defense of both the Ring Magazine and IBF titles, newly obtained, not so newly so to speak, because he got them over a year ago.
But this is going to be his first defense as a champion, and that he's set to be doing it abroad. I wonder how Jai Opataya feels about that, and the people in Australia. I remember them saying they wanted his first title defense to be in his neck of the woods, not someone else's, as a champion, not the challengers.
Wouldn't it be better for Matchroom to do this show in Australia?
Don't Jai Opataya draw better in Australia than, say, Jordan Thompson draws in the United Kingdom? Nothing against Jordan Thompson, but he's an unbeaten up-and-comer.
He's not a draw yet.
I don't think Jordan's got the same following that Johnny Fisher has, or somebody like that, a cult following that follows him from city to city, fight by fight. Wouldn't this fight be better suited in the land down under than across the pond?
It's a legitimate question.
All the while, reigning WBA Cruiserweight champion Arsène Gulamarian of France is reported to have been offered the fight with Richard Riakporhe. Richard, who withdrew from the fight with Jai Opataya. Now, why is it that Richard feels more comfortable boxing Arsène Gulamarian than Jai Opataya? Isn't one champion just as good as the other?
You know, Jai Opataya, crafty as he is, he hasn't boxed in over a year, so that was an avenue of opportunity for Richard Riakporhe to exploit what ring rust he's amassed.
Jai Opataya hasn't fought in the last 12 months. Arsene Gulamarian, he has.
What happened to Chris Billum-Smith? Ain't he over there?
Newly crowned WBO Cruiserweight champion Chris Billum-Smith, who boxes under the Boxer banner, the same as Richard Riakporhe, I can only deduce that there might be trouble in paradise staging that fight, that rematch, I should say, since Richard Riakporhe dished out Chris Billum-Smith his lone defeat several years and several fights ago. I can only deduce, based on this rumor, that they're not able to make that fight in a jiffy the way I initially anticipated. So they're exploring other avenues. They're exploring an Arsene Gulamarian fight, and I'm okay with that, though it accents what I've been telling you, that they didn't want Richard going over to Matchroom for that Jai Opataya fight.
So they pulled him out of the purse bid. For fear that Matchroom might end up winning the purse bid and Richard might end up crossing the street, they decided we'll pull him out, we'll put him in there with another fighter, another champion.
Reigning WBA Cruiserweight champion of France, Arsene Gulamarian. The caveat, however, is he's supposed to be under contract to fight Tommy McCarthy of Ireland.
Assuming that he is under contract, they're going to have to smooth that over. They're going to have to give Tommy something if those contracts are signed and the ink is dry. Maybe they get him a slot on the undercard of what could be Gulamarian versus Riakporhe.
Maybe. You find him some ham and egg guy, some punching bag for him to pounce on while he waits for the winner of this fight, and then he goes on to face the winner. You've got to smooth things over with Tommy McCarthy.
I like Riakporhe versus Gulamarian. That has all the makings of a slobber knocker, a barn burner.
Things are shaking, rattling, and rolling in the men's cruiserweight division. You've got Jai Opataya versus Jordan Thompson in the works. You've got Gulamarian versus Riakporhe, and Joe Smith Jr. versus Zurdo Ramirez.
Was that announced 1 or 2 days ago?
Talked about that here on the channel, and what you're seeing is a transatlantic interest in cruiserweight action. That's what you're seeing. Cruiserweight, often treated as the heavyweight division's ugly little sister.
Usually.
Recent years, we've seen a growing interest in cruiserweight action internationally since the inception of what was the World Boxing Super Series and Oleksandr Usyk's monumental run to go on to become that division's undisputed champion, currently a unified heavyweight champion set to see action this upcoming weekend.
The cruiserweight division was first recognized by the World Boxing Council back there in 1979. His sister organization, the WBA, didn't recognize them until 2-3 years later in 1982.
The IBF decided to recognize them the following year in 1983, and it's a division that never had the traction or the glamour of the men's heavyweight division, the granddaddy of all weight classes, even though they neighbor each other, the cruiserweight division and the heavyweight division.
Here today, we're seeing a growing interest in this weight class on several fronts, in several markets, the Australian market, the British one, and the American one.
All right, with that, when you have two major promotional outfits and two major platforms across the pond investing money in cruiserweight action, that means more coverage, more fights, more exposure. And the same applies to Zurdo Ramirez moving up there here in America. Americans don't normally watch cruiserweights, you know.
Even though some great American fighters have come out of the cruiserweight division, like Evander Holyfield, though most of the acknowledgement that Evander receives is for his works as a heavyweight more than a cruiserweight.
Better still, this could help the division's profile now that Zurdo means to campaign there and become a champion there.
It could.
Have to admit that Joe Smith Jr. versus Zurdo Ramirez, I like that fight. They're both coming off of losses and they're both on the bounce, on the rebound.
Two former champions, Zurdo having been a champion at super middleweight and Joe having been a champion at light heavyweight.
It's a good fight. Finally, in men's junior middleweight news, current reigning undisputed champion, but not for long, Jermell Charlo is still angered by the WBO. Don't touch my belt.
Come defend it.
You guys know what this is about. Tszyu's been this guy's mandatory challenger for a while now. They were supposed to fight some months ago. Jermell Charlo decided to go the other way, fight Canelo Alvarez up there at super middle, and he expects the WBO to stand idly by and let him.
Fuck that.
For now, the sanctioning body will allow Charlo to hold on to their title all the way up until fight night. However, once the opening bell rings, he'll be stripped and Tszyu will be elevated to full champion straight away. Charlo, needless to say, wasn't too happy about their decision. When recently speaking to a group of reporters, the Houston native asked them to use whatever power they have to reach out to the WBO to reconsider their choice. Y'all write the WBO and tell them, give me my belt back and don't touch it. Tell them, don't touch my belt.
You know, even Jermell Charlo anticipates that should he beat Canelo Alvarez, there may be a second fight. There may be a rematch, and he might have an extended stay at super middleweight.
Not that I think that's going to happen, because I don't. I have Canelo Alvarez beating him. I have Canelo stopping him. But on the premise, for argument's sake, that it were to happen that way, what do you expect the WBO to do? What do you expect Tszyu to do? He's paying his sanctioning fees the same way you're paying yours. You think he's supposed to just sit on his hands, wait for you to come around?
Whenever you decide to get around to him.
The sweat equity that the pugnacious champion has put in has him vexed over the entire situation. Although a win over Alvarez will make him just the third fighter in history to become an undisputed champion in two separate weight classes, neither Clarissa Shields nor Terence Crawford were active champions in their previous divisions at the time. Charlo, though, if it weren't for the WBO, was hoping to become the first. It only makes sense for me to fight and win and have 8 belts active.
No, it doesn't.
Why are you so worried about the WBO title at 154 anyway if you're vying to become WBO champion at 168, along with all the other alphabet titles? Tszyu had a very interesting take on all of this.
Year and a half I was supposed to fight him, you know, year and a half, and then he had the deadline. Rules are rules. There should be justice, you know. You can't just hold a division, you know. It's wrong. So if he wants that belt back, then bring the other 3 along with it, because I want all 4. He's already talking about coming down, which means that he already knows that he's going to lose to to Canelo.
That video, courtesy of Fight Hub TV, you hear what Tszyu's saying, that last part, that's the interesting part, that because Jermell is still interested in a WBO title at 154 when his next fight is at 168, and because he's already talking about coming back down, perhaps he doesn't like his chances against Canelo, which begs the question.
Then why fight him?
Money. Money is the obvious answer. Fighting Canelo Alvarez gets you more bang for your buck than any fight between 154 and 168. There is an obvious financial incentive in sharing the ring with Canelo, win or lose, and I anticipate
This pay-per-view is going to do robust numbers. If Canelo was able to do 800,000 buys with Caleb Plant, I think he could do the same or better with Jermell.
it's an obvious financial incentive in fighting Canelo Alvarez, so maybe there's something to what Tszyu is saying, because why is Jermell so concerned about a belt he doesn't care to defend?
It's not an injustice, it's due process.
The order for Jermell to take on Tszyu came down way before Canelo came into the frame.
Yeah.
This isn't about fairness, this is about preferential treatment. This is Jermell Charlo wanting the WBO to give him the same preferential treatment the WBC is giving his brother. And I applaud the WBO for not doing that, because that belt is better off in the hands of Tszyu while he's fighting and being active, certainly being more active than Jermell Charlo.
Jermell is only going to fight once this entire year, and that's the Canelo Alvarez fight. Who knows what he does after that? If Canelo beats him the way I think he's going to beat him, how long is it going to take him to recover?
Jermell fought only once last year. He's only going to fight once this year, whereas Tszyu, he's already fought 2 times this year alone.
And he's ramping up for a third fight in either the fall or winter months.
He's gunning for a fight with WBC's interim champion, Brian Mendoza. And I applaud that, because activity isn't just good for the fighter. It's good for the division, it's good for the sport of boxing, and the sanctioning bodies themselves. You need an active fighter, an active champion, not an absentee one holding a belt hostage. That's not good for anybody.
If you're at 168, then stay up there.
You like your chances, don't you? And you anticipate that you might fight Canelo for a second time, so who cares what happens to the titles you had at 154?
These American champions are far too entitled.
Are you kidding me?